Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
An article in the Washington Times says this: Atheists incensed after IRS grants them tax exemption as religious group. This was an article that posted in August of 2013, but I thought it was relevant to this show. The leader of an atheist group reportedly is incensed that the U.S. government has granted it a tax exemption, citing allowances for religious organizations, and she's even angrier at learning that she's considered a minister under the Internal Revenue Service Code. "We are not ministers," said Annie Laurie Gaylor, who heads the Freedom from Religion Foundation. She added the organization doesn't want the tax exemption if it's based on codes granting allowances to religious groups. "We're having to tell the government the obvious. We are not a church. Most people might welcome the chance to bypass paying taxes to the IRS," the article says. The Justice Department even filed a brief in court arguing that Ms. Gaylor is eligible for the exemption, which gives her tax-free housing, because she heads up the group and atheist organizations are eligible for some of the same benefits granted churches. But Ms. Gaylor's group is suing, saying the federal government's tax exemptions for religious groups does not apply to the atheists, and that the federal government's insistence on giving the benefit is actually tantamount to a tax-free housing award. Ms. Gaylor and her husband, Dan Barker, initially were awarded a government housing allowance of $15,000 per year in 2009. They've been arguing they don't deserve the benefit because they're atheists and proud to claim no religious affiliation ever since. The Justice Department's view: Buddhism and Taoism are affiliations that don't believe in God, but they're still considered religions and are qualified for the benefit. A very hot topic as to whether or not non-belief, non-theism, atheism is actually a religion unto itself. This is no surprise, as published on Fox News by Johnny Moore. He's a professor of religion and vice president of Liberty University, where he supervises its Center for Global Engagement. I'm going to read part of the article that was published on Fox News, and you're probably going to drive into a ditch, but I want you to chill and hang with me. He says this: "Actually, no one really is irreligious. This world beats to the rhythm of religion in 1,000 ways, and absolutely everyone is religious, including atheists. Religion certainly includes an idea of a God under whom man is inherently subservient, but religion also governs the belief system undergirding the way people think about and live their lives. It tells them who their authority is, and it informs their values and behavior. It gives them their sense of morality and goodwill, and it guides them in the way they treat themselves and others. Religion does nothing less than construct one's view of the world. Atheists are, in fact, some of the most religious people. First, they have a functioning God under whom they are subservient. Normally, it's science or rationality, but mainly themselves. And that idea of God informs the way they live and interpret their lives. It informs their biases and determines their values and governs any sense of morality or ethics they adhere to or ignore. Once that's settled, all that's left is the preaching, and they preach all the time. This new breed of atheists is obsessed with the idea of God. They write books, deliver speeches, comment bomb the evangelical blogosphere and generally rant on ad nauseum about the ills of believing in God. Honestly, comically, some atheists must type the word God on the internet 5 times more often than most Christians I know, and they do it with the fury of a fire and brimstone zealot. Maybe no one invokes the name of God more than they. And they are doing so in more and more virulent ways, such as the shocking moment when Dr. Dawkins recently told Al Jazeera Television that he believed being raised Catholic was in itself even more psychologically damaging than being abused by a priest. Instead of just ignoring God or the idea of God, atheist preachers feel somehow compelled to rid the earth of him. So they argue endlessly that theists can't prove God exists without confessing that they can't prove he doesn't either. Occasionally, some of them discover that they do indeed worship a God, but it is an insufficient one. They worship a God that loses his car keys when they're in his hand, or that misplaces the glasses on his face, a God filled with laws and inadequacies, and a God themselves whose probability of helping them supernaturally is absolutely zero. Everyone needs and everyone has a God. That's why we're so religious. It's a matter of which religion is yours. David Luce is author of Making Sense of Scripture. Wrote the article for the Huffington Post. Has atheism become a religion? From the article. Before you dismiss the question out of hand, consider these 4 interrelated bits of evidence. His word. Number 1. As recently reported in the New York Times, military personnel who identify themselves as atheists have requested chaplains to tend to their spiritual needs. As the Times article notes, Defense Department statistics show that about 9,400 of the nation's 1.4 million active duty military personnel identify themselves as atheists or agnostics, making them a larger subpopulation than Jews, Muslims, Hindus, or Buddhists in the military. Having their own chaplains, the article explains, would give atheists a sense of legitimacy and help validate their own system of values and beliefs. Now, if I can hit the pause button on the article for just a second, I see that number as extremely suspiciously low. Defense Department statistics show 9,400 out of 1.4 million active duty military personnel identify as atheist or agnostic. Maybe that's openly identifying, but 9,400 out of 1.5 million, that number does not sound proportional to me. Anyway, it's something we want to take a look at. Back to the article. Number 2. The U.S. government reports that in 2008, those identifying themselves specifically as atheist composed the 18th largest group of 43 possible categories of self-described, quote, religious identification. The number of persons so identifying themselves almost doubled from 7 years earlier. Admittedly, atheist is one of the options listed under no religion specified, but given that other options for respondents included checking agnostic or no religion, or not answering the question at all, it appears that identifying oneself specifically as an atheist, as opposed to simply not religious, is growing in appeal. This points to the utility of a distinction made by Jonathan Landman between non-theists, those with no particular religious belief, and strong atheists, those who view religion not only as irrelevant, but as misguided and dangerous. Number 3. Similarly, it's worth noting the degree to which atheists routinely, strategically, and often vociferously position what is often described as their secular humanist views against religious traditions. Read or listen to any of the celebrity atheists of the past decades, like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and Sam Harris, and you realize that they fashion many of their arguments not against some alternative economic, political, or philosophical position, but against organized religion. Religious faith is clearly their primary opponent in the contest for the intellectual allegiance of the population, which makes it hard not to conclude that they offer their views and beliefs as a viable alternative to traditional religious systems. And finally, number 4. And you probably knew this was coming. Consider all the comments made by self-identified atheists on articles published in the religion section of the Huffington Post, where this article was posted. Seriously, either atheists have way more time on their hands than the rest of the population, or they've got something to prove. This assertive us against them tone, in this case against established religion, is characteristic of new religions. Think of the Christian Gospels, especially Matthew and John, and their stance toward first-century Judaism, for example. As Rabbi David Wolpe observed a few months ago, there's an astonishing garrulousness to the comments made by atheists to post about religion that suggest not simply a lack of interest in or even disdain for religion, but a competitive anger directed against persons of traditional religious faith. Obviously, plenty of religious folk radiate the same garrulousness, but this post is about atheists. Taken together, these four elements suggest that atheists regularly demonstrate attributes: desire for spiritual sustenance, the importance of self-identification, offering their worldview as an alternative to other religious systems, and an assertive, if not competitive, style of engagement with other religious points of view, usually exhibited by religious folk of all persuasions. While atheism as a movement doesn't have the formal structure, celebrations, or creedal dogmas of organized religions, we might at least identify atheism as it exists today as an increasingly vibrant faith tradition. Much has been made of the Atheist Church over in London, and the co-founders of the Sunday Assembly wrote an article for the New York Times, Pippa Evans and Sanderson Jones. And I'll just read from the article here, their words. The article is called "At Atheist Church, No Faith Required." It says this. It was posted, by the way, January 22nd, 2013. Is atheism a religion? Of course it isn't. Here's why. We don't believe in God, but we are ready to change our minds the minute the evidence changes. Now I'm going to stop for just a second. The authors attempt some humor in this article. I'm going to do my best with it, okay? The article says, it's not a question of faith. Should God stride through the door now and say, stop that atheist church business at once, we'd stop it. And we'd believe in God. And we'd say, God, put some clothes back on. Naked old guys are gross. He just stepped out of the shower, we assume. Will atheism replace religion? That is not our goal, obviously, but neither is it our concern. We started the Sunday Assembly. Think of it as part foot-stomping show, part atheist church, because the idea of meeting once a month to sing songs, hear great speakers, and celebrate the incredible gift of life seems like a fun and useful thing to do. What's more, church has got so many awesome things going for it, which we've shamelessly nicked. Singing together in a group? Super. Hearing interesting things? Rad. Our first reading was Theodore Roosevelt's Man in the Arena bit. A moment to think quietly about your life? Wizard. Getting to know your neighbors? Ace. For we humans are blessed with minds that can soar far above the clouds, to the spinning supernovas that dance through the cosmos and glimpse into the dawn of time itself, and cursed with brains that can't resist the biscuit tin. The Sunday Assembly's goal is to help people enjoy more of the former and avoid the latter. In essence, we want to help people, ourselves included, to live better, help often, and wonder more. Thus, instead of atheism making the world a cold, unfeeling, and alienating place, it can make it richer, deeper, and more profound. Compared to the eternal nada that awaits, transcendence can be found in a breath of wind on your face, or in a mouthful of custard tart. Now please close your eyes, open your hearts, and join me in a prayer to Richard Dawkins. It was an attempt at humor, apparently. I did my best with it. I'm going to address some of the stuff in that article that makes me crazy, but I'm going to come back to that. And we're going to get into your calls and emails in just a second, but I'm going to set the record straight on several fronts. Let's go back to the Fox News article from Johnny Moore. The article called Atheism is a Religion Too. It said this: religion governs the belief system undergirding the way people think about and live their lives. It tells them who their authority is, and it informs their values and behavior. It gives them their sense of morality and goodwill. I can see you shaking your head. I can see you through the radio. And it guides them in the way they treat themselves and others. religion does nothing less than construct one's view of the world. That's completely inaccurate. Look, the non-religious person does not use a religious measuring stick to evaluate and live their lives. Our morality does not come from a religious doctrine or a book of magic or some nebulous force out there, some spiritual membrane that everybody talks about but nobody can actually prove. Religion does not construct our view of the world. It's such a huge misstatement. It's really obvious to anybody watching that this person's not even shooting for accuracy. The article also says, first, they have a functioning God under whom they are subservient. Normally, it's science or rationality, but mainly themselves. And that idea of God informs the way they live and interpret their lives. It informs biases, determines values, and governs any sense of morality or ethics they adhere to or ignore. Again, this is absolutely false. Taking responsibility for one's own life choices does not elevate one to God status. Nor is it automatically informed by arrogance. I mean, you'll find people out there who are like, I am my own God. Sure, you'll hear some of that sometimes. But you've rejected the idea of God because you wish to elevate yourself to the godhood. Well, that just doesn't wash. Now, if you want to insist that the driving force behind decisions constitutes godhood, if you want to play with definitions like that, you can. But it's the same as asserting a person doesn't actually drive a car, but is instead the car god. You decided you were going somewhere, you got inside, you fired up the ignition, you navigated toward a destination with purpose. You enjoyed the reward of a pleasant day on the road. You accepted the consequences of calamity should an accident happen. You determined whether or not you buckled up your seatbelt, whether or not you drove the speed limit, whether you obeyed traffic signals. You got to determine who else was in the car with you, who got to take the drive with you. You set out on the excursion as a result of your own decision-making process. This is not a religious exercise, nor is the driver a god in any intellectually honest sense of the word. The religious charge that the taking of the wheel, the determining of a course, and the acceptance of personal responsibility is a declaration of godhood. Well, if the non-religious person was forced to speak in that awkwardly religious language, they could say that they are the lords of their own life. Okay, fine. But mostly it's just a misuse of terms, word games. We see no governing force out there with a supernatural cause. And because we believe it would be immoral and destructive to surrender our mind and our will to somebody else, we simply choose our own path. We take our own steps. This ham-handed charge that this is somehow religious behavior just reveals how far some people are willing to stretch to paint rational actions with religious labels. And regarding the preaching of atheism, let's talk about that for just a second. For literally thousands of years, religion has been a steamroller, constantly on the offense, constantly pressing and pushing itself on the masses, making countless unsubstantiated claims, infecting and impacting the political policies and the cultures of whole nations, indoctrinating generations of children, building its temples and churches and gathering spaces on every corner, with every different religion and denomination declaring itself the right one or the true one and all the others are false ones. Religion has stamped itself onto generation after generation after generation for a host of reasons, and in many cases over the years has been left unchecked and unchallenged because of fear, religious oppression, or just ignorance. We just didn't know the answers, so we accepted the religious ones. I see religion as kind of this runaway train, going high speed, no brakes, and pretty much no resistance until now. Here we are in the 21st century. And in light of the much more satisfactory answers provided by science and reason, some of us are just holding up a hand and saying, hey, we'd like to make a challenge here to the claims of religion. Remember, religion started the conversation. Religion started all of this. Like this salesman who walks into town and he's selling snake oil, promising it'll heal everything, it'll cure everything. There's nothing this little product won't do. And now some of us out there in the audience hold up a hand and say, actually, we'd like you to substantiate that. We don't want to take your word for it. We would like proof before we accept this. People are asking for religion to substantiate claims, or they're just refuting the inaccurate claims outright. The pastors and the preachers and all these ambassadors of woo out there, throwing out truth with a capital T, some of us are just holding up a hand and going, nope. And then we tell you why we disagree, and then we present the evidence as to why you are factually incorrect and why you are damaging science and history and the minds and hearts of people all over the world, because many of these doctrines include threats of eternal torment. The refutation of religion is not religion. It's a response. And that response only exists, it's only necessary because religion's everywhere. It's everywhere you look. It's got its hands in everything. This hugely well-organized, well-funded machine. And there would be no need for us to counter it with freethought websites and radio shows and videos and blogs and conventions and protests and whatever. There would be no need for any of that if we weren't having to respond to these religious claims that have been going nonstop. And the only reason vocal atheists get highlighted on the evening news is because they are there drawing attention to the false claims already proclaimed by the religious entity. You wouldn't need that person there if the religious message was not going full bore and requiring the counter argument. This does not make the non-religious person like the religious person. It doesn't mandate any sort of religious behavior or belief. It simply means somebody made a big claim and one of us just said, prove it. And while I support the right to have an atheist assembly and for everybody to do their thing over in London or in any assembly, I must take issue with statements made in the Times article by Pippa Evans and Sanderson Jones. They said this: what's more, church has got so many awesome things going for it, which we've shamelessly nicked. Singing together in a group, hearing interesting things, a moment to think quietly about your life, getting to know your neighbors, etc. The article asserts they've nicked or taken or stolen awesome things from the church. The statement's just totally wrong. Religion and the church did not create music and the enjoyment of music as a group. Singing together, I didn't belong to the church. Church did not invent the motivational or instructional speaker. Church does not have a monopoly on meaning or the considerations of the meaning of life. Church does not own the idea of community, hanging out with your friends, your family, neighbors, whoever. These things existed long before the church and well outside of the church. So to allow religious organizations to brand them as their own is something that you and I should never ever allow. Why would we surrender ground that never belonged to the church in the first place? It's like saying a concert is religious because they have guitars and drums and you can see those in church. Robes are automatically religious because choir members wear them. Potluck dinners are religious because the First Baptist Church of Hooterville down the street has potluck every Sunday after the last service. It's like saying that the church owns sex because of the term the missionary position. Church doesn't own communal singing or gathering or inspiration, education, any of the natural human inclinations that you and I appreciate and enjoy. It does them well, really well. It does them very publicly, and it promotes them better than almost any other group in the world, if not every other group in the world. But it does not own the ideas of community purpose, organizing to promote and celebrate a common interest or goal. All that stuff. Church doesn't own that. That's my tirade for the first part of the show. Let's see what you have to say on the subject as we go to the phones. 513, you're on the Thinking Atheist Radio podcast. Who's this?
Hey, this is Mario. How you doing, Steph?
Mario, thanks for calling, brother. What's going on?
Well, you hit a lot of the points on the show that I was going to bring up, but Matt Dillahunty would often say to people, religion is more than one thing. I think part of the problem is defining what we're talking about. So if you can define what religion is, I think then you can turn around and say, do atheist group fit that definition? I remember once, several years ago, Eric Hovind visited I think it was one of the Skepticon conventions, and Thunderfoot was coming in, and he said to Thunderfoot, this looks like a religious gathering. And I thought, by that definition, everything is a religion, So I wonder if it would help just to be more clear on what a religion is. It may not be as easy to define.
Wherever you go, the religion changes a little bit. If you go to like dictionary.com, it is a set of beliefs concerning the cause, nature, and purpose of the universe. If you go to other places, it says you must have a deity, which I hold to. I think if you're going to be religious, you're looking at a supernatural element to it. Otherwise, it is not religion.
That statement that you just made, I think, would go a long ways to clarifying it. If somebody said to me, you call yourself atheist, but this looks like a religion to me, I would have to ask them, how do you define religion? Like you said, if he includes a deity, well, that clearly excludes us. We have no deity.
And if it's just people getting together for a common purpose, then you can inform them that Comic-Con is a church and that bowling night is a church. All those things fall under that category,
Exactly. So, I think rather than trying to defend yourself right off the bat, ask them, how do you define religion?
I'll bet we'd be surprised at how few have examined the word as to what it really means. It's a word often used, but seldom truly understood, I think.
And that may be part of the process in establishing a dialogue. I've often been criticized that, atheists, never explore the spiritual nature of existence. And I have to ask them, can you explain to me what spiritual is? Then I can dialogue with you. And, you soon realize that all they mean by spiritual is something that they don't understand. If they don't understand it, it's spiritual.
What makes it even more confusing is that there are people in the skeptic community who use the word spiritual as in transcendent, some amazingly sort of transcendent moment where you are awestruck, you're deeply moved. That is their spiritual, but I don't like the use of the term in that way because I think it's confusing. I think there's a better way to sort of brand those experiences.
Well, they're equivocating. They're using a word when another word is much better. For example, simple emotion. Some people that experience profound emotion say it's spiritual. Well, what's wrong with just saying, no, it's profound emotion?
It's profound. It deeply moved me. I got goosebumps. I was tremendously affected by that moment in a way I can't even describe. I mean, there's a way to communicate those times in your life when words don't suffice. You can say words don't suffice. There's a way to do it.
Sure.
So, Mario, thanks for the call and thanks for being a part of the show. Much appreciated.
Right. You bet. Bye-bye.
All right, take it easy. Ray sent a letter in that sort of ties in what Mario was talking about. Religion, defined, the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. Definition of atheist, a person who disbelieves or lacks belief in the existence of God or gods. Ray continues, I've been asked this question by the unenlightened so many times that it stopped being funny. There was a time when I thought I was being asked, or having it asserted as some kind of joke, but it seems like some religious people actually believe this. It's inconceivable to me that anyone within the faith could not know the simple definition of the word religion. In addition, they have no understanding of the meaning of the word atheist. Of course, we heathens know what it means and wear the title with no confusion. We simply see no evidence of the existence of a God, and that's it. No dogmas, no rule books, no fixed worldview. The A in the word atheist is simply shorthand, meaning not a, i.e. theist is a believer, atheist is not a believer. Gnostic, agnostic. You are not a Gnostic. Symmetrical, asymmetrical. You are not symmetrical. Anyone with access to a dictionary can discover what the A at the beginning of the word in this context actually means. Ray, thanks so much for the message. If you go to the ironchariots.org website, they've got some great stuff on the assertion that atheism is a religion and atheist gatherings are church. A couple of those points are this. Look, if I'm not buying what you're selling, meaning what the religious are selling, if I'm not buying what you're selling, it doesn't mean I'm selling something else. Does atheism, strong atheism or not, consider the universe as a creation of superhuman agency? Of course not, just the opposite, in that atheists do not believe in such a superhuman agent in the first place. Must atheism in all cases involve devotional and ritual observance? No. Must atheism in all cases prescribe a moral code? No. Of course, there are systems of morality that atheists would be comfortable calling their own, but atheism in itself does not suggest which moral system one should follow. More to the point, is atheism a set of beliefs concerning the cause, nature, and purpose of the universe? No. Atheism is a lack of one specific belief, not a set of beliefs. It's not a set of beliefs. Even strong atheism is simply a position on one particular issue. There is no God. Thus, even assuming strong belief in this point, that doesn't say anything at all about the actual cause, nature, or purpose of the universe, except in the negative. It's not God. Some people claim that atheism is a religion based on later definitions of the word, like something one believes in and follows devotedly. A point or matter of ethics or conscience. To make a religion of fighting prejudice might be an example. Technically, atheism could be considered a religion in this sense, but this wanders very far from what theists imply when they call atheism a religion, and it thus can be considered equivocation. As the entry itself mentions under this definition, fighting prejudice is a religion. If this is true, then so are capitalism, football, and Star Trek. It is surely not much of an insult to be included under such a broad definition. On the other hand, many religious people would likely be insulted if this were taken to be the only meaning of the term when applied to their own religion. Atheism would be a religion in the same sense that golf is a religion, but not in the sense that Catholicism is a religion. If atheism is a religion, then not collecting stamps is a hobby. Not playing golf is a sport. Not believing 13 is unlucky is a superstition. That bald is a hair color. That nudity is an outfit. That off is a television station. That being healthy is a disease. And that abstinence is a sex position. I wanted to include tonight the perspective of a guy who is the president of one of the most influential atheist organizations in the world, and he hears the charge of Atheist Church probably as much or more than anybody else. And his name is David Silverman. David, thanks for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me on the show, Seth.
Tempted to call you the Reverend Silverman, since you represent the largest atheist church in the United States. You probably hear this charge all the time, don't you?
Oh, you're just like a religion when you push your agenda. Oh, my goodness.
You guys are just like church. You get together. You might as well have hymns and an offering plate, blah, blah, blah. And that's another thing, too, is if you ever talk about finances, which, by the way,
right.
Funding is required to be able to do much of what needs to be done out there where you've got this well-organized church machine. I mean, you know what that's like, right?
It's crazy how people are willing to and eager to conflate and minimize atheism and bring it down to the level of religion. I mean, yes, we have dues. Yes, American Atheist charges dues. Yes, we are passionate about our proposition, and so is the ACLU, who also charges dues. The unions charge dues. The teachers' groups charge dues. Your volunteer fire departments charge dues. American Atheist is a nonprofit educational organization, and just about every other educational nonprofit organization in the country, we have dues, but that does not make us a church.
I was talking to somebody the other day about, hey, buy a T-shirt. Thanks for your donation. Thanks for sponsoring a show. And they're like, oh, geez, you guys are just religious. Anytime money comes up, it is a very touchy thing.
It's lame. I mean, it's lame. And obviously, it's said by people who don't get it. It's said by people who are looking for an excuse. I am so sick and tired of being compared to the poison that is infecting this planet because we try to defeat the poison that is infecting this planet.
And it has to be said that the church is hugely organized, hugely well-financed. I mean, we can sit here and be hipsters throwing pebbles against the fortress wall.
Yeah.
But unless we're able to really put some organization together, we're going to be largely ineffective out there.
We're going to be completely ineffective out there. We're trying to make ends meet here. I mean, American Atheists we have audited financials, very transparent. That's something that religions don't do. And our budget is dwarfed by even a medium-sized local church. Our national budget is dwarfed by a medium-sized church.
Hey, Dave, is that still going on with the transparency with churches? You know, how they don't have to itemize as a 501c3.
Yeah.
Was it a lawsuit?
It is a lawsuit. We are suing the IRS, and it is moving on. The IRS has filed a motion to dismiss, which is expected. That's the first thing anybody does. And we made our oral arguments, and we are waiting on that decision. At this point, quite frankly, we're going through machinations because if we win, they'll appeal, and if they win, we'll appeal. This is going up.
Well, spell it out for the listener who isn't following this. It's not that you want to tax the churches. It's that you want the churches held to the same standard as the other 501c3s. You want to flesh that out for me?
For the purposes of this statement, there are two kinds of 501c3s, religious and non-religious. And American Atheist, for example, is a non-religious. We're a 501c3 educational organization. So every year, because we're a public trust, we don't pay taxes, but we do file our forms. It's a matter of public information, how much money American Atheist brings in, how much we spend on charity, and how much we spend on salaries. Those three pieces are public information. If you're a 501c3 religious organization, you do not have to file those forms. We're not talking about a lot of work, and we're talking about a little bit of money just to hire an accountant to file a few forms. But one thing that does is it gives us what we have in this country is a religious business, a religious industry that is getting 501c3 tax exemption, but is completely the opposite of transparent. We have no idea how much money they make. We have no idea how much money they spend or what they spend it on. And we as a country are giving tax breaks to people who do that, and we have no idea where it's going. They say, oh, we do so much charity, but we have no numbers at all. If I say American Atheists spend so much charity, the people can just log on to any of the IRS forms, or they can just ask us for it, and they get our financials. It's public information because we're a public charity, we're a public trust as a 501c3. Churches don't have to do that, and this is why churches are so corrupt. There's no oversight at all. And the only reason that there's no oversight is because they're religious. That's against the law. That's discrimination from the IRS. And we're going to take that sucker down. And all we're going to do is when we win, and we will win, this is a fantastic lawsuit. When we win, all that's going to happen is that the churches will have to do the exact same thing that every other 501c3 has to do. File a few forms every year.
They're going to call you a killjoy. Come on, this is a sacred thing. It's our house of worship.
Yes.
Why would you reduce the conversation to mere money, that kind of thing? You know, I'm sure you've heard a lot of that.
Oh, sure. And I was on another radio show some time ago, and I was on against a pastor of a church. It was a mega church, and the mega church had a fitness center and a coffee shop. And they had told the IRS that the fitness center and the coffee shop were vital to the existence of their church, and therefore did not file their forms for the fitness center or the coffee shop. The IRS said, no, you have to file your forms for the fitness center and the coffee shop. And guess what the church did, Seth? They shut down the fitness center and the coffee shop rather than declare the income from them. And then that same pastor in that same organization dared to say we should police ourselves after admitting After admitting, oh, I guess we lied to the IRS when we said they were vital because then we shut them down, so I guess they weren't so vital. So in other words, when you said they were vital, it was a lie. Yeah. And then he said, well, we should police ourselves because Jesus. Well, guess what? Because Jesus is not a reason for us to turn away from obvious corruption, obvious lies, widespread obvious lies.
Well, the two words ministry expense are a huge umbrella that you can throw anything you want to under.
Absolutely.
I totally get that. Well, come on, you've got a big event coming up. The National Convention for American Atheists is always a huge national thing, but people are going to be saying, look, you're going to have 1,000+ people coming from all over the world. This is like Mecca, right? They're coming to worship at the house of atheism. Pastor Silverman, you got to respond to this. I mean, what do you think?
Quite frankly, my ego is such that if people want to come to Salt Lake City and worship me, I'm quite frankly okay with it. I mean, it's okay with me, but there is no worship at a convention any more than there is worship at the DNC convention, any more than there is worship at an ACLU event or a union event or a firefighters event. We are bringing in speakers, not pastors, not preachers. We're not telling anyone how to think or what to do. We are bringing in a wealth of people, fantastic people, to tell us about them. Well, that's why we're coming. Chris Cluey is the professional football player who allegedly got fired for being pro-gay. This guy has an interesting story, and it's not preachy. Denise Stapley won Survivor Philippines. She's the $1 million winner of Survivor. She's not a preacher. Mark White is the bassist for the Spin Doctors. Guess what? He's not a preacher. He's going to talk about his music. Denise is going to talk about the TV show. We've got a Hollywood director coming from The Simpsons. David A. Silverman is coming. He directed The Simpsons, and he directed Monsters, Inc. And he's going to come and talk about what it's like to be an atheist and be a director in Hollywood. This is not preaching. Really, what we're there to do is provide energy, provide entertainment, and provide a lot of fun.
So it's an opportunity for people to come together and sort of share something that we have in common, which is recent freethought skepticism. If there's someone in our listening audience who's never been to a convention, the phenomenon of seeing someone who feels like they've been holding their breath, like they're surrounded by religion everywhere they go, to their office, in their homes, going to a convention, it's like they get a chance to breathe for the first time that year. It's an amazing sensation to see these folks come together with smiles. There's laughter.
Late night comedy. We're going to have a costume dance. Everybody's going to bring their costumes. It's going to be fun. We got late night comedy with our pub crawl going on. But I'll tell you something, Seth. I can't agree with you more on this. I remember back in 1996, I believe it was, when I first walked into a room full of atheists. It was my first experience. And it was in Washington, D.C., and I remember the moment. I remember the moment when I walked into a room and I looked around and I said, wow, everybody's an atheist. It was so impactful. It was so empowering. It was so freeing to walk into a room full of atheists. And a lot of people don't understand that when a Christian or a Jew wants to walk into a room full of Christians and Jews, they go to church or temple. They do that every week. We don't get that. We never get that unless we go to a convention. And American Atheist has the biggest and best convention of the year in the country.
The event itself is going to be April 17th through the 20th in Salt Lake City, Utah. If somebody wants to find out more, there are still tickets.
And you're going to be there, Seth, and I'm really happy that you're going to be there. I'm psyched about this convention because of its breadth and because of all of the new speakers that no one's ever heard before. Ernie Chambers is coming he's the state senator who sued God. He's coming. Okay. The executive director of SETI is coming to talk about extraterrestrial life from a scientific point of view. That's going to be really interesting.
If you want to find out more about the convention, tickets, all that stuff, you can go to atheists.org. David Silverman, thanks for your perspective, and we'll look forward to seeing you mid-April here in Mormon country, okay?
Thanks a bunch, Seth, and always a pleasure. I'll talk to you soon, and I'll see you soon.
Christy sent a letter in and said this. Is atheism just another religion? No, absolutely not. By definition, atheism isn't just another option on the religion spectrum. When I was first coming out of my Christian upbringing at 23, I became extremely passionate about atheism and studying and wanting to discuss evolution, astronomy, and cosmology. I had a very similar background to yours, Seth, and the passion that had been poured into my relationship with Christ, quote unquote, for the first 20 years of my life simply got rerouted to atheism and science. A religious friend mentioned with a wee bit of superiority that atheism was just another religion for me. At the time, I couldn't put my finger on why the comment bothered me so much, but since then, I realized that an accusation like that is only said to call the atheist's credibility into question, saying that we're just being fanatical and contrarian for the sake of bucking the system. We couldn't possibly have evidence or legitimate reasons for letting go of the archaic beliefs we'd never before dared to challenge. I think the more passionate the atheist, the higher the likelihood of being accused of just committing ourselves to another religion. It's the passion that gets misconstrued as religiosity. Believers don't like a noisy atheist, so rather than addressing the arguments made, however sound, they simply attack the atheist's excitement and they call it religion. It's pretty amusing that in an attempt to call our credibility into question, believers just say we're no different than them. Christy has a point about how we are often perceived, and she and I do have this in common. When I first sort of woke up from my stupor and began to look around and see a fresh new world, and then I realized how limited my world had been previously, and how I'd been sort of cordoned off and unchallenged, plucked out of public school and placed in private school, and I'd never really been surrounded by any argument that genuinely challenged the sacred biblical beliefs and the threats of hell. You don't want to go to hell, do you? You don't want to get this wrong. My father used to just say it outright. Hell is a real place. And he genuinely was afraid that one of his children might one day end up in hell. They had to be saved. He was operating from a point of protecting his children, but it was still damaging stuff. And when all of this sort of hit me in my late 30s, I was passionate. Christy is dead on, spot on accurate. I was overcompensating in a lot of ways. I was probably an irritant to theist and non-theist alike. I felt like I was making up for lost time. It's like you're holding your breath for decades. And finally, you're able to breathe and you can't get enough oxygen. And then you want to tell other people. You want to tell other people what you have discovered. Look, there's a great big universe out here that no one ever told us existed. Check this out. Unfortunately, few people in those circles are listening. We're driven to try to tell people. And someone will call that evangelical atheism. You're just wanting to spread the good news. Well, look, if you discover something amazing, you do want to tell the world. If you see someone you believe is being damaged by harmful superstition, you want to help them break free of those chains. Helping another human being and sharing what you have found as an evidence-based life and this amazing sort of reality-based existence, and you want to talk about that, it's not evangelism. But that can be labeled as evangelism. They're like a baby Christian, man. He's just a baby atheist. It took me probably a year and a half to sort of settle down a little bit, to finally relax and breathe a little bit, to come to the conclusion that not every discussion had to become an argument about religion. And that not every post on a social media page by a religious person was an excuse for me to go in and make the counter argument in the comments section because somebody's got to say it. And not to drive everybody in my family crazy at gatherings because I couldn't hold my tongue. I discovered that it's not enough just to be right. You have to also be effective. You have to be a bit of a strategist. You're not going to browbeat people into an epiphany. Eric sent a message and said, is atheism a religion? In a way, yes. What religious people mean by atheism is religion in this context is an apparent solidarity of views and the passionate support of those views that is often similar, in the same way that fundamentalists defend their religious beliefs. The problem here for both sides is that we often make judgments about the entire group based on the loud, vocal minority. The religious often assume that every atheist is outspoken, in their face, and ready to fight because these are the only atheists they know. They're not aware that their quiet, pleasant, humble, self-sacrificing coworker is an atheist because she's too afraid to speak up about it in their presence. Sadly, atheists, the very people who proudly champion reason and shun cognitive bias, are guilty of the very same sampling bias. It's easy to cast a wide net on the behavior of the religious because of people like Fred Phelps, Pat Robertson, etc., while neglecting amazing people of faith like Francis Chan, who lives a modest life and donates 90% of all the money he makes towards efforts to abolish sex trafficking in third world countries. So is atheism a religion? Strictly speaking, no. Is atheism often religion-like? You bet. Eric, thank you very much. Area code 828. Thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
This is Jesse out of North Carolina.
Thanks for calling, Jesse. What do you have for the show tonight?
My opinion of theists making the claim that atheism is a religion, I think it's just their knee-jerk reaction to atheist organizing. Maybe like a subconscious attempt to scare atheists from trying to organize. Or they're trying to say, like, when you organize, you look like a religion and you'll be just like we are.
So you're saying that you think they might be threatened by the idea of sort of this contrary opinion, this opposing force organizing and gaining some say, some power, some influence out there. So they try to marginalize and say, oh, geez, you're just trying to be just like us. Don't bother. We sort of cornered the market. Would that be an accurate way to say it?
Right. And it seems like from the conversations I've had, it's almost an attempt to keep you from organizing, saying when you organize, you're a religion too. Since atheists usually talk about the negative points about religion, if they can group us in as being the same as them, they think that defeats our argument that religion is negative.
They're probably also playing on the very real fact that a lot of people who are non-believers, who are non-theists, atheists, are so nervous about appearing religious that they will automatically reject outright any community, any convention, gathering, any organized effort. They don't want to be seen as a lemming, a sheep, as part of the herd, part of the Borg collective. And they're so nervous about that they overcompensate and become these isolationists over here. They sit in the corner by themselves, largely, in many cases, ineffectual because they have not sort of joined forces with others of like mind. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, but that's my take on it. It always seems to be like the last thing they say after all the arguments. They're like, well, you're just a religion too, and it's like, what's that supposed to mean,
It's like saying, I know you are, but what am I? That's exactly what that sounds like. Hey, thanks for the call and thanks for listening. Greatly appreciated, my friend.
All right, thanks.
One of my favorites, and I find it very telling, Aaron Ra mentioned this on a show a while back, and I'm going to mention it again here, is when someone says, you know what, you atheists are no better than religion. They'll hear about an atheist gathering or the upcoming American Atheist National Convention in Utah, or they'll hear about the Unholy Trinity Tour. Aaron and Matt and Seth are going to Amarillo March 22nd. It's just another church. And they'll say, you guys are no better than religion. And without realizing it, I'm thinking, without realizing in many instances, they're marginalizing their own foundation. They're saying, well, we're not that great, but you're no better. You're no better than us. We're on equal footing. Meaning that if we have a weak position and we're no better than them, then they have a weak position to begin with as well. It's a hugely weak defense of what should be a strong position. Well, you're no better than us. Nope. You guys are just like us. What does that reveal about how they feel about their own religious position? John sent a letter and said, tonight's topic of whether or not atheism is a religion always bothered me. Bothers me because it's indicative of a larger issue that I've been noticing much more as of late. Maybe it's because I'm conversing with theists more, or because I'm just paying closer attention. Whatever it is, I'm noticing more and more that most theists I talk to or listen to online choose to play language games instead of talking about the ideas the words were meant to represent. Is atheism a religion? No. Were they ever actually talking about atheism in the first place? No. Those who say atheism is a religion are probably referring to something like secular humanism, but instead use atheism with the definition of secular humanism and attack the straw man that all atheists are secular humanists, and therefore atheism is a religion. Before you can even talk about how secular humanism is not a religion, you have to talk about how atheism does not equal to secular humanism. Issues like this seem to be the backbone of most theistic debate. When I run into this one in particular, I try to focus on how atheism is defined in a way that helps the theist confront their own misconceptions. Sometimes it works, and sometimes not so much. After they say, atheists do this, blah, 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 I always come back with something like, what would you call a person who doesn't believe in a God yet doesn't do that? Are they still an atheist? If so, can we say that all atheists do that? Is there another word that describes people who do that? Do you think it's fair to misrepresent atheists that don't do the thing you're complaining about? A lot of times it only seems to stick during the conversation, and when they go back into the world, they slip right back into the same problem. How do you deal with this when you're confronted with it? Do the people you talk to seem to understand, or just adjust their rhetoric temporarily? Well, John, if you're asking me, I found that most of the people who play these arguments are sending, they are not receiving. They aren't listening. I'm not saying that we don't provide the rational representation, we don't give them the evidence, we don't sort of refute the woo that's being thrown our direction. I'm not saying we don't do that, but you can't expect, in almost every case, a short-term victory. What you can hope for is to plant a small seed that might germinate and one day really produce something significant months or even years, even decades down the road. And I've heard this story many times. You know, I wasn't listening back then. But in the back of my mind, it always bothered me. I didn't want to admit it to myself that it bothered me, but it really did. And finally, after all these years, I decided I'm going to go find out for sure. And guess what? That kind of thing. Hey, it happens. You don't hear the stories as often as you'd like, but it happens. Most people, if they're going to brand someone else, they're sending, they're not receiving. And atheists can be guilty of that with the religious. We say all the religious do that. All the religious hate people. All the religious do that. Well, if we're going to be honest, you can't say that all of any group does any one thing. You just can't. You can say that largely they do. Here's their belief system. Here's their doctrine. Here's their practices. Here's the evidence. Yeah. But to lump everybody into one big sort of category and throw it out there like a football, it's just not healthy. I think we have to have a more nuanced view than that. Area code 631. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, my name is Mark. How you doing?
Mark, thanks for calling. What's going on?
Kind of a quick thought. I don't know if I heard anyone say anything like this, but it occurs to me that for some theists who have not invested much time in trying to understand atheism, they are looking at behavior through religious-colored glasses. For some of them, it might very sincerely look like a religion to them, because they see people getting together, that's what they do in their religion. They see people, whatever, singing songs, that's what they do in their religion. So some of them who haven't invested much time in it may very well think it really does look like a religion.
I think that's absolutely valid. If you are taught, if you are trained to see things a certain way, hey, these characteristics constitute a religion, and that's sort of how they've been programmed to see the world, they're going to filter everything through religion. I think that's absolutely valid.
And, you know, the other half of it is that we're all human. We all share a common, brain. We're going to behave in similar ways with different objectives or whatever. So there is a small fraction of our behavior that does overlap. But again, I think it goes back to, if you're talking, some of your other callers have said, someone comes to this at the end of an argument as the last straw. Well, that's different. They've obviously spent some time thinking about it. But I think for some people, and I think a lot of theists don't spend a lot of time thinking about us. So for some of them, they just need a lot of education.
Most of these atheist assemblies use the word assembly or atheist gathering, atheist meetup. They'll get together once a week, once a month, often on a Sunday, which makes sense. It's half of the weekend, and weekends are when people aren't in work and school. I mean, I won't begrudge them that. But if an atheist assembly popped up in your area, would you go? Or would you be nervous about being labeled as a churchgoer?
I would consider it. I'm a member of one or two groups that meet locally, And I go there for not completely different reasons. You meet people, talk to people, you share common interests. We're all social human beings, So, yeah, I would definitely consider it. There's one that's not very close to me, so I haven't. I thought about it, but haven't made it.
I'm not sure if I would want them to emulate the church hymnal. You go in and you sing 3 songs, and then they have an announcement, and they sing 2 more songs. And then maybe they take up a donation, which would substitute for the offering, and then they would have the speaker, and then afterwards another song. I think if the order of service too closely emulated a church service, I would not be comfortable. I'd be like, we're ripping something off here. This just doesn't wash. But if it's like a convention or a gathering or a meetup or a hangout, or even bringing in a speaker, somebody who's compelling and entertaining and has some great ideas, someone who'll challenge us, even somebody we disagree with, and we get together to listen and sort of take that information and chew on it for a while, I think that's absolutely valid. I totally support it.
Yeah, emulating religion too much with the songs and stuff feels a little creepy to me. Hey, thanks a lot. Keep up the great work. I really love your show.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Goodbye.
I think, was it Daniel Dennett who had mentioned that there were some religious songs that someone had taken the lyrics and replaced them with science lyrics. And if it's a religious song, it's a religious song, Sagan instead of God or Jesus, or science instead of heaven, to do those type of substitutions, I think it's lame. Let's get our own stuff, people. There's plenty out there. There's plenty of great humanist stuff. There's plenty of great music and art that celebrates the rational, real world, that we don't have to go and grab a hymnal and scratch out everything that says Jesus on it and put something secular in there. I just think that's lame, and I always have. Abby sent me a letter and said, as an open atheist for many years, it used to infuriate me how believers would call atheism a religion. Does a weekly Sunday book club fall under religion now? What if this book club happened to enjoy only reading Shakespeare and analyzed his poetry line by line? Is any gathering of like-minded individuals no longer considered just that? After the anger subsided, I realized calling atheism a religion is the only way believers can wrap their head around the concept, which is what our caller just said. If I don't believe in a God and practice that faith, I must be doing it with something else, right? But atheists have no leader, merely peers with interesting views, new outlooks, theories, and discoveries in science of all forms. Atheists don't pray. We give ourselves pep talks. We rely on our moral compass and our culture to know cheating on your spouse may not be the best idea, stealing isn't okay, and murder isn't a good way to spend your time. I don't need commandments to tell me that. And I certainly don't need the promise of everlasting life in heaven, or the fear of eternal damnation to make this life mean something. Believe it or not, since becoming more open with my views, I've grown to be a much better person, knowing this is my one shot to enjoy it all and be remembered by those who I leave behind. Atheism is not a religion, but a growing number of like minds and lovers of knowledge. Abby, thank you so much for the message. I'm going to end tonight's show with an article by Penn Jillette. It's from January 22nd, 2013 in the New York Times. Penn said this: "Don't replace religion, end it." Religion cannot and should not be replaced by atheism. Religion needs to go away and not be replaced by anything. Atheism is not a religion. It's the absence of religion, and that's a wonderful thing. Religion is not morality. Theists ask me, if there's no God, what would stop me from raping and killing everyone I want to? My answer is always, I myself have raped and killed everyone I want to, and the number for both is 0. Behaving morally because of a hope of reward or a fear of punishment is not morality. Morality is not bribery or threats. Religion is bribery and threats. Humans have morality. We don't need religion. Atheism is the absence of religion. We don't really need atheism. We just need to get rid of religion. Religion is faith. Faith is belief without evidence. Belief without evidence cannot be shared. Faith is a feeling. Love is also a feeling, but love makes no universal claims. Love is pure. The lover reports on his or her feelings and needs nothing more. Faith claims knowledge of a world we share, but without evidence we can share. Feeling love is beautiful. Feeling the earth is 6,000 years old is stupid. Religion is often just tribalism, pride in a group one was born into, a group that is often believed to have God on its side. We don't need to replace tribalism with anything other than love for all humanity. Let's do that, okay? Religion also includes fellowship, joy, compassion, service, and great music, and those can be replaced by fellowship, joy, compassion, service, and great music. Atheism is the absence of religion. We don't really need atheism. We just need to get rid of religion. Thank you so much for listening to the show tonight and for being a part of it. Next week, we're going to explore the satanic panic. It began as a phenomenon in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s where the devil had infected everything, but there are hints of it everywhere today. Join us next Tuesday night. It's the satanic panic on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. I'll see you then.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.